Thank you so much for staying tuned to this channel. If you just joined us, this is International Forum. I am Wilson Marshall. Well, today it is all about the Sudanese crisis, where two generals are at loggerhead. One general leading the Sudan Armed Forces, while the other one also is leading the Rapid Support Force, still of Sudan, but they are the paramilitary outfits. The main army versus the paramilitary outfit, they are at loggerhead. Why are they fighting the battle for supremacy? Nobody saw it coming. You were like 5 and 6. All of a sudden, Saturday, bam. There was confusion, there was commotion, and many things have been affected. Anyway, my analysts will throw more light on that. But not after giving you stories making the rounds globally. Let's get straight down to the Ukraine-Russia palaver. This time around, President Putin chose to pay a visit to Kherson City. Yes, he has already paid a visit to other region. He came, he drove the car by himself, and right now he has gone to Kherson City just to take a look at how the troops are faring. He said he doesn't want to hear, he wants to see. He wants to know what is really going on, because right now his stand has been declared as part of Russia. Now that is just to show dominance, that is just to show purpose of leadership. You get to see the clip. He came down by a helicopter, and of course he drove around the city, and he said he's there to give moral support to the troops. He's there to make sure that all things that he planned is just going according to plan. Don't forget that Putin won the world, especially the West, saying that if you should interfere with this and the pressure becomes too much, he positioned tactical nuclear weapons along the border of Belarus, and he said he's not afraid to use it. He told everyone who wants to listen that he's not afraid to use it. And now he's talking about rebuilding the destroyed parts of those cities. Don't forget that right now Russia is the president, so to speak, of the Security Council of the UN. You know, it's a turn-by-turn thing, sort of, you know, after every two months or 3 months, they rotate the presidency of the UN Security Council. Right now, Russia is on top of it, and the man Putin chose to pay his own troop a surprise visit to really make sure that they are there, spirit, soul, and body, to carry out his own wish in the Donbass region. Don't forget that the Ukrainians also, they're trying to do a comeback. They want to reclaim the land occupied by Russia. How do you think all this will pan out? A year plus now, the war rages on. All about tactics, all about strategy, and all about determination to carry out whatever they really want to carry out. Now, let's come straight back again to Russia, where a journalist has been arrested in Russia. That's the wrong clip, thank you. Where the journalist was arrested in Russia because he wrote against what the Russians are doing to Ukraine. The name of the journalist is Vladimir. Yes, that is one of the journalists. A part of the name is Vladimir. It's like, you know, they share the same name with Putin. You know, the name Vladimir is like, you know, common in Russia and, of course, in Ukraine. There's someone, because of a report, he like, you know, he wrote, and of course he was speaking against the attack of Ukraine. He's been slammed with 25 years in prison. He said to him he did the right thing. He never obstructed any form of justice. He never spoke against the Russian state, but the truth, according to him, must be spoken. He wrote and he spoke against the attack of Ukraine by Russia. Don't forget that there was a similar situation whereby a little girl drew a picture or made a painting sort of Russia attacking Ukraine, and of course, and calling that painting, the attack is not good. Immediately, the mother of that girl was someone with the girl. Say, how come you did this? They snapped the picture, make it go viral. It didn't go down too well with the Russian government led by Vladimir Putin. And right now, there's a journalist speaking against what Putin is doing. Maybe all like thinking about it, unless he wants to be a martyr. Don't forget that he is a member of the opposition, one of the foremost leader of the opposition. This man, we're talking about a journalist, and is writing against the atrocities in quotes right now of Putin. Now, how do you feel this man will take it? How do you think you really do all about this, just to squash any form of insurrection, so to speak, via the print, electronic media, or the social media? I believe that that's the reason why they took that step, 25 years in prison for speaking against Mother Russia. How do you feel about the action of the government of the day in Russia, led by Putin, against that journalist? Do you think it's fair? Or do you think when it comes to national security, all should be done to uphold the territorial integrity of a particular nation? That is what Russia is holding claim to. What you wrote, what you said, is against our existence as a country. Hence, he was arrested, 25 years. Anyway, let's move straight down to the U.S., where a man shot a teenage boy. Why? The boy mistakenly went to the man's house thinking that he was supposed to be there to pick up someone. Yes, up in Hebron. Yes, Kansas City. And the U.S. is like, being ravaged with too many stories that are like, gun-related. You get to hear shooting, you get to see a child carrying the mother's gun. You get to view also about a youth going into a classroom, shooting. This time around, a man opened fire at a black dude, a teenager, all because he went to the man's house mistakenly to say, look, I was supposed to be here. This is not the right want to pick on something, and the man opened fire. Do you think this is racial discrimination? Do you think it's connected to, in quote, right now, racism? And now the county sheriff is talking about this. A man will be charged to court and will be charged for manslaughter, will be charged for murder. Let's see how this particular case will be handled. Don't forget that this is not the first time it's happening to a colored person. This is the first time it's happening to the black race. We're seeing so many persons protesting against the brutal nature made on the black folks by U.S. police. This time around, an individual opened fire on a teenager. Yeah, that's the teenager you're seeing there, an American footballer. And the black community, they are mourning. They are seriously mourning. The big question on their lips is just very simple. Are we really equal in this land? A land of dreams, a land of possibilities, a land of hope, a land of freedom. Are they really free? That's a question for them to answer. Anyway, let's leave the news, some news making the rounds globally. Let's move straight down to what we are here to talk about, what is happening in Sudan and how it's reverberating the politics of the world. We'll start from that region in Africa, and of course going to expound, yes, the implication, global politics. With me here in the studio to talk about this, he is a legal practitioner, human rights activist, public affairs commentator. Join me to welcome Barrister Emmanuel Obakpolo. Barrister, welcome to International Forum. Appreciate your coming.
I'm delighted to be here.
All right. I was expecting the likes of Barrister Henry Wanza to be able to make it to the studio with join us in the studio, and of course we're going to have a nice time discussing this particular issue. From reports, nobody saw it coming. Sudan has been plagued by crisis, plagued by turbulence, disturbed by religious battle and conflict to the extent that in 2011 they choose to go their own separate ways. South Sudan and Sudan because of religious affiliation. And right now, each part that's separated, they are having issues. Because focusing right now on Sudan, or where Bashar al-Assad has been there for quite a long time, to the extent that he was chased out of office when his own men, his own commanders ganged up against him through the effort of the Sudanese military and of course the Rapid Support Force, the paramilitary outfit. They ganged up against him. They choose to share power with civilians with the intention of handing over Sudan back to democracy rule. The military again, they came together. These two generals came together and they chased away the civilian arm of the government of Sudan, where doctors, engineers, nurses, workers, artisans came out in mass to say, enough is enough. Still, they were chased out. And right now, Sudan is being ruled by a military, formation, so to speak. On Saturday, the two factions, led by these generals, opened fire at each other. That sparked a serious crisis in Sudan. What can you really make out of this? Because right now you can see the smoke bellowing, you can see people complaining. Even the UN is complaining. Blinken gave his own statement about what is really going on in Sudan. Because it's like, two brothers fighting, two persons of the same interest, the same folks trying to salvage governance in Sudan, fighting against each other because of what? Barrister, take it up from there.
Africa has been barricaded with so many crises, and just now the world itself is going through a lot of challenges, and Africa has not been spared from the turmoil, crisis, whether natural, whether by human invention, and every other form. And just now, Sudan is on the news. And some time ago, Sudan was on the news when there was a secession where South Sudan now broke out from the original Sudan, so to speak. And since then, Sudan has known no peace. Under the rulership of then President Umar al-Bashir, Sudan went through a lot of crises because there was hunger, there was a lot of political, economic challenges in Sudan. And President Umar al-Bashir ruled Sudan for almost 3 decades. That is almost 30 years. He was the president of Sudan. And at a point, the people were now shouting. There was this general outcry and clamor that he should vacate the presidential palace. And the man said, no, I am here to stay, and to stay for eternity. But at a point, the two generals who are at each other's throat just now came together. That is Ahmed Dagalo and the other, the military led general, and that of the rapid support force led by Ahmed Dagalo. They came together and formed an alliance to oust then President Omar al-Bashir from power. And they succeeded because at a point they were the backbone of the then President Omar al-Bashir. So by the time when a man's backbone is now against that man, you know that all is not well and all cannot be well. So that was what transpired in Sudan. And in 2019, he was ousted out from office. That is then President Omar al-Bashir. And then we saw a drama wherein the two generals pretentiously told the world that there was going to be a civilian transition. Yes. That was the paperwork they presented to the international community, and in particular to African Union, AU. And before you know, pretentiously again, there was this civilian transition. And the same persons again ousted out that in 2021. And that was how they jointly run Sudan until now that both of them are at each other's throats. What does that go to tell about leadership struggle in Africa in particular? African leaders have over the years displayed the attribute of self. And what African leaders do or what they display is that they assume that when it is well with them, it is well with the people. So we have come to see a situation in Africa where the book written by George Orwell, The Animal Farm, which naturally described the communist situation in then Soviet Union under the rulership of Joseph Stalin and also Benito Mussolini of Italy. But it has turned out or metamorphosed to be the same situation in most developed nations, particularly Africa, where African leaders sit tight to power and they feel that they feel that power is no longer transient. Rather, power belongs to them for eternity. So the possibility of them displaying the attribute of either an emperor or an empress, as the case may be, is what we begin to witness. And that is what has transpired in Sudan just now. Two great generals in Sudan who agreed to oust out a particular president. And the man, they pretentiously, like I did say, brought a civilian transition which did not see
the light of the
day. And before you know now, there is this tussle. Now, it goes, the germane question to ask is, why should an armed force, the military of a particular country like Sudan, now begin to have power tussle with a paramilitary force? That calls for much worry. Just now, by virtue of the present status of the military in Sudan, the military is less in number than the paramilitary force. In terms of arms, equipment, the paramilitary force is more equipped than the military in Sudan. And that is why you now see that Dagalo is more comfortable as a general in the rapid support force, which is termed a paramilitary force, than that of the military.
Led by Abdel Fattah.
Yes. So the struggle now is between the two of them. Who holds sway? Who dictates the future of Sudan?
No, but the thing is that some presidents are like saying that these were like, they're not strange bedfellows. They are companions. They are colleagues. They have the same dreams. They have the same vision. That nobody saw this coming. That the fracas that started on Saturday took them by surprise. What's your view on this opinion?
Two captains cannot be in a ship. That is the common adage we've heard over the years, even as a growing child. Two captains cannot be in a ship. So now, there is power, there is struggle for supremacy. And that is why you see the tussle. Over the years, both of them have pretentiously put on the toga of oneness, toga of companionship, toga of friendship. But it appears that the veil of that toga is torn just now. Why? Because there is struggle for supremacy. So now that Abdel Fattah is telling himself, I can imagine that, telling himself, I can lead this country. I can become the Superman of this country. Then Dagalo is also telling himself, I can become the Superman in this country. But what our leaders fail to understand, or what most leaders of the world fail to understand, is you can only be a Superman when you have the support of the people behind you. By the time the people are tired of you, by the time there is this mass outcry by the people against you, you may not be safe.
But in this situation, the people, they've been crying, they've protested, they've been shot at, they've been killed. They have vented their opinion, say we don't want this military rule. Take us back to civilian rule. It's like it's falling on deaf ears.
You know why? Because most civilian or most democracy that we have witnessed and experienced in Africa are the same military boys who once upon a time were putting on khaki and rule the people. So, before you know, the same persons will now metamorphose and drop their khaki and take to Agbada to rule. And by the time they are ruling in Agbada, the same attributes they displayed while on khaki, they exhibit it, they manifest it in Agbada. So, the question now is, what is really the change there? And that's why you see the people of Sudan just now don't even know the difference between military regime and that of democratic system. They cannot, because the impact is not there, the change is not there. Mind you, former President Omar al-Bashir was a military leader too. He ruled as a military leader, he metamorphosed into civilian. And now we are having Abdel Fattah and Dagalo, who are on khaki, military leaders, and who also want to metamorphose into civilian leaders, thereby dropping the khaki and picking, they will not pick all up the agbada to put on. So there is really no difference. And that is why the people have been crying. Like in the case of Umar al-Bashir, it was just the increased price of bread in Sudan that led to his final departure from the presidential palace. Because there was mass outcry. We can no longer buy bread. We can no longer eat bread. Bread used to be the food for the commoners in Sudan. But today, bread is now out of the reach of the commoners. So there was protest. And these two men took advantage of that because they know so much about former President Umar al-Bashir. And he was ousted out from office. Then they now vote, instead for one to say, okay, let one step down for the other and support, just like they did support Umar al-Bashir. No, they now said both of us should rule together. So the principle of two captains cannot be in the same ship.
All right.
What is playing out.
You just know I'll come back to you shortly after going for this break. If you just joined us, this is International Forum. We're taking a look at Sudanese military power tussle, the political implication. Don't go away. Thank you so much for staying tuned. If you just joined us, this is International Forum. We're taking a look at the Sudanese military power tussle, political implication. You keep on saying two captains cannot be in a ship. Two captains cannot pilot one ship. What do you think might have given rise to this crisis? I mean, because they're like walking, they have the same goal, they have the same vision, they have the same plan, so to speak, that after a while they hand it over back to the civilian rule, and the civilian, they'll be waiting and waiting still. No response from this military junta, so to speak. What do you think is the core cause of this outlook?
It's a struggle for power. Now that both generals, or the two generals, cannot resolve themselves, one cannot step down for the other and say, okay, I support you. You pull your uniform, put on agbada, like I did say, then I support you. While I take charge of the military and the paramilitary together. Let's harmonize the military and the paramilitary together and probably give it a joint name, as the case may be. While you rule, then I support you. But they cannot, because both of them has intention, and there is a clash of intention between the two of them just now. Now that there is a clash of intention, the people of Sudan, the Sudanese, suffers. So that is why the people are going through the pain. Now that you cannot see, both parties now, both generals have now clashed. So what happens here? What they pretentiously maintained, they can no longer preserve it. Hence, we cannot preserve it. It resulted to a clash. Now that there is a clash, what do? Before you know, the clash makes both generals to become what? Enemies. Now, the impact of it is that the people of Sudan will suffer more, both politically, economically, health-wise, and otherwise. They will suffer more. Because the country just now cannot be at peace, and once there is no peace, there will be no room for development. So even what the people have been crying about, the people will suffer it what? More. Because there is no development, there is no peace. Now, other neighboring nations, even sister nations like South Sudan, there may be a possibility of a spread of what is going on just now in Sudan to South Sudan. Mind you, few months ago, South Sudan also had a taste of what is happening just now in Sudan. It was Sudan and some other sister states, neighboring nations, that came together to resolve, if they have, that transpired in South Sudan. So it is now the turn of a sister state like South Sudan and other neighboring nations to come to see how they can resolve that of Sudan. But being that as it may, the question I keep asking is, what is now the function, what is now the duty of the international organization?
We are coming to that. Don't forget that Blinken talked about this. He gave a warning and, of course, a word of advice for them to swallow their pride or their ego to settle this because it's affecting them. Don't forget that American embassy was affected. European embassy was affected. Many foreign nationals in Sudan trying to make sure that there is peace and order, they were affected. Do you think that the warning of the U.S. Secretary, so to speak, will make any difference in this onslaught?
We'll see. Anytime I hear there is problem in Africa, and I hear that maybe a member or an officer or a minister of one of the big power nations in the world has issued a warning, I laugh.
U.S. Secretary of State,
I
laugh?
Yes.
This is Blinken we're talking about.
Whether blinking or not, that is not the issue. Over the years, since 1994, I have been following up crises in Africa. How crisis has ravaged the political stand of Africa, the effects on Africans, and the supposed intervention of the international community. And I begin to see that when you place both to get on the ground, they are nothing but they go their separate ways. Two parallel lines that cannot meet.
What would you say?
The interest, yes, is political. Because the international community don't do anything that they don't have interest on.
But for the way this man is sounding, he has interest in Sudan.
Interest on. It's not on Sudan. It's not on Sudan or on the people of Sudan. That is not the interest. The interest is what they stand to achieve. Mind you, more weapons will come through the back doors. Mind you, food will become an issue in Sudan. So, who brings in what? Who takes out what? Who benefits what? That is all the interest of the international community. And it beats me hollow and gets me more worried when I see international organizations like African Union, ECOWAS, cannot resolve their own problem. Instead, the Secretary of State, United States, have issued warning. Then you will now see African leaders, other African leaders, will now be queuing on that statement issued by the Secretary himself. No, I don't think that should be the case. The case here is brotherhood. How do we resolve our problems? By now, I think that African leaders should have summoned up or called for an emergency meeting and probably invite these two persons over, maybe to a neutral ground, and say, look, what are you guys doing? What is really the problem with you? No, why don't we do it this way? If there is going to be a unity government or a national unity government, like they call it, then they should do it. But see that the people of the lives and property in Sudan is protected. I think that is the major responsibility of government. And the international organizations that they are also government of themselves, mind you. So they should be able to resolve the problems in Sudan and not to wait for somebody kilometers away
to make a statement.
Yes, to make a statement that may not even get to Sudan.
But what makes you feel that all other African countries vis-a-vis the Union will just come behind what Blinken talked about, giving them warning to please shake the sword for peace to reign in Sudan? Does it now mean that they don't have the power to tell component states in Africa as a continent to be calm?
It's a drama that cannot be really, you cannot really identify the drama. Immediately, the Secretary of State issued a statement. Our own president now issued a statement to say peace should be maintained, there should be ceasefire in Sudan. I just laughed. Where over here in Nigeria, we already have fire everywhere.
No, we don't have fire everywhere. Listen, I don't like exaggeration. Please.
Listen. Hunger is fire. The drama of supplementary election is fire. What are you talking about? See, we cannot be discussing issues in other countries and pretend not to see our own. That amounts to the biblical proverb that says you should remove the log in your eyes first before you want to remove that of another. Yes, in another man's eye. That is the situation. So what we are saying.
Let's focus more now on the African Union.
I know you wouldn't want me to talk about Nigeria.
No, let's leave that. Let's
but the situation just now is this: African Union has a lot of responsibility. It has a lot of responsibility, and to my mind, they are not meeting up to their responsibility. Because now we are talking about Sudan, we don't know who is next. Once upon a time, we talked about Mali, we talked about Burkina Faso.
And they still have this military
we talked about Ethiopia.
Yes.
We talked about
Eritrea.
Today is Sudan. So the question now is, who is next? So what precaution, what step is African Union taking to see that matters like this, issues like this, do not arise? And when they do, how do we curb them? Because one is an issue to prevent something from happening. It's another issue when that thing happens, what to do. And you know it is not in our culture to handle, to give issues like this emergency attack. It's not in our culture. We don't believe in handling things at the time when they are developing. What we do is we allow it to develop, then we begin to speak English. That's what we do here. So I am saying just now that African Union, African leaders has a lot to do. And until those steps are taken, Africa will continue to face the crisis she is going through. And we pray and hope that some of these crises may not consume Africa.
I mean, it isn't that African Union, they are ill-equipped to handle a situation like this. We are seeing weaponry, men carrying guns, carrying explosives, carrying rocket launchers, hitting so hard at each other. And we have a union that ought to be taking care of all this, and prevent them from happening. You know, if they happen, a way to really make sure that there is peace. Are you saying that the African Union is ill-prepared for this?
Yes, that is the position. It's not just having the arms. It's not just having a strong, solid armory. It's the political capacity to resolve your issues. Most of these issues that we have seen now, they are political in nature. And the only solution to them is also political.
Political solution?
Yes. It's political. So you cannot begin to handle matters like this, issues like this, that need political solution. You begin to handle it from a military drill. You worsen your issue. And that is what we are saying. That look, let us not allow issues to get out of hands. Let us not, the benefits of brotherhood, the benefit of sisterhood, the benefit of oneness, the benefit of unity is what? Peace. And until we begin to give all of these factors considerations, Africa may not be at peace.
Now let's take a look
and that is why you see the crisis everywhere. Like I did say, today is Sudan. Who next?
Now let's take a look at Sudan right now. They've been crying for democracy for quite a long time. It has been eluding them. Do you think that this is a beginning of the end of democracy in Sudan? Because brains have come out in mass to say no. We have engineers, doctors, students, artisans, you just name it. Legal practitioners, they came out. They've been shot at. Some of them lost their life because of the struggle. And now we're having two of these elephants. Two generals are supposed to be maintaining peace and order. Two generals that came together to chase out the other half of governors headed by civilian personalities. And now they're at each other's throat. Do you think Sudan will see democracy soon?
Well, ousted President Umar al-Bashir was more of a military personnel than a civilian.
But he was a civilian ruler, from military to civilian rule.
That is why I told you, that is why in my analysis here, I said the reason why African democracy will not be in consonance with Western democracy is because the same persons, the same military boys who truncated democracy in their days are the persons who have metamorphosed into Democrats. And that is the situation. So by the time I am putting on khaki years ago, today I threw away my khaki and pick an agbada and put on. And you are expecting me to not change my attribute. No. Mind you, the leopard cannot change its spots, no matter the rain or sun that shines on it. And that is the problem with Africa. So, until we get persons who are not only Democrats by name and title, but are Democrats at heart, are Democrats in the mind, are Democrats in their thinking, are Democrats in their activities, are Democrats in their qualities. Until we have those kind of persons in power, we'll keep experiencing what we have just saw and what we are still seeing and what we shall see in the future in Africa.
All right, now
so Africans have a lot to do for themselves. I think it is time for Africans to bid goodbye to men who were once upon a time khaki men who want to metamorphose to be civilians.
And now back to Sudan. They've been crying for democratic rule. But with the onslaught of this general, do you think democracy will return to Sudan in the nearest future?
Democracy can return to Sudan if the people of Sudan can come out.
They've done that.
They have done that. They should continue.
They've done that.
They cannot kill everybody.
Because right now,
hello,
in this onslaught, over 200 people have been killed.
People will be killed. That is part of the sacrifice. These two men cannot kill everybody and rule each other in Sudan. Sudan cannot contain them. And that is the need. That will still take me back to talk about intervention from the African Union. Because if
but you said we are to go by your speculation, have so much to do, they're failing.
If we are to go by your speculations now that over 200 persons have been killed, then the people should now fold their hands and be looking. Then where will the solution come from? So the people must take their destinies in their hands. That is the position. They must be ready to face it squarely. Because no African will love Sudan more than the Sudanese themselves. The Sudanese are the people who will love their country more than every other person on earth. So if they love Sudan and they want to keep Sudan, then they must come out to defend democracy in Sudan.
They should come out in mass.
They should.
Even if it means them dying, they should keep coming out.
They should.
We are talking about starvation, talking about unemployment, talking about inflation, talking about insecurity, talking about military rule. Right now, they are almost at the state of civil war.
They've been swimming in all that you have mentioned. They've embraced and faced all that you have mentioned. They've observed over the years all that you have mentioned. But if they now go in like the snail into their shell, will that bring the solution? The answer is an emphatic no. So what the people need to do is to come out and go against anti-democratic forces in Sudan. Because just now, the two generals, whether they believe it or not, they are anti-democratic forces.
Who will not fight the generals? Men are fighting for the generals. Who will not be the one to stand up against these generals?
Well, we've had generals before this.
Because rather from reports, the people are hiding.
We've had
generals. They are tired. They are afraid. They are hungry.
Listen. We've had generals before the two generals. We've had emperors, strong emperors in Africa before these two persons. One of which, late Muammar Gaddafi, was also a military prisoner.
But still, to some Libyans, it was the best Libyans ever had.
And that is
it was taken from them.
And that is what we have come to experience in Africa as a continent. We've always had a situation where the former leader is better than the new one. That is what we've come to experience in Africa. And Sudan is not spared. We talked about former President Omar al-Bashir, how he ruled the people to the extent that bread that was food for the commoner was now out of reach of the commoners. And the people protested. And these two men came together and said, look, let's send this man away. We were his allies, but we can send him away. They sent him away. Now, both of them refused to resolve. Instead, they pretended that both of them can take Sudan to the promised land. But here we are. Are they taking Sudan to the promised land or to hell?
Wow, good question. Are they taking Sudan to the promised land or they are taking Sudan to hell? According to the legal practitioner here with me in the studio, don't forget about 200, they've lost their life. The Red Cross, some foreign nationals, they are trapped right now. And some have been told not to move, they should remain where they are until the situation improves. Now, what advice do you have for the generals? What advice do you have for the military men fighting for these generals? Don't forget to mention the citizens of Sudan, that is the Sudanese.
The generals and their supporters, or their boys, as the case may be, should know that nobody should love Sudan more than them. And nobody should protect lives and properties in Sudan more than them. So if they be able to realize this reality, then there is need for them to back out from this madness called war or clash. Instead, they should all look at the interests of all Sudanese and Sudan as uppermost and give in whatever struggle, whatever supremacy they think they are fighting for. If they don't, Sudan will be consumed.
All right, thank you so much, Barrister. Appreciate a wonderful analysis. You've heard him. If they don't put their acts together, Sudan will be consumed. Don't forget, once one indivisible country called Sudan, due to clashes, interests, due to unsatisfied region, they choose to go their separate ways, forming Sudan and South Sudan. And guess what? These two halves, they've known no peace. They are fighting amongst themselves. They are killing themselves. And they are clamoring so bitterly for democracy, which has been eluding them. How do you think this will pan out? Do you think over time all this will settle? Or do you think with intervention from African Union or our foreign counterparts, they can just come and make that difference out of the peace in Sudan? Only time will tell. See you next week, Tuesday. God willing. Bye for now.